All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. We're exploring a truly fascinating and honestly, a highly specific spiritual framework from the text, A Walk in the Spirit World. We're going to unpack exactly what this source says happens to human consciousness, the literal exact moment our hearts stop beating. And I'll tell you right now, it is a perspective that completely challenges what modern medicine tells us about the end of physical life. Now, regardless of your personal beliefs, the sheer mechanical detail and the timeline presented in this text offer a completely different lens on human mortality. So we're going to walk through the author's distinct warnings and their step-by-step guide for the soul's journey.
Right off the bat, the text introduces a massive paradigm shift. Instead of looking at death as this dark, ultimate end or some kind of eternal parting, the author insists we actually need to view it as a happy transition, literally an entrance ceremony to the afterlife. It really makes you wonder, right? How much easier would this transition be if we just accepted our human mortality instead of constantly running from it? Recognizing and actually embracing this transition is presented as the absolute first and most crucial step to ensuring a smooth departure. And according to the source, a peaceful transition to the afterlife should be a remarkably serene, completely natural journey. But there is a catch here. You can't just arrive at the threshold and automatically expect peace. The text argues that this smooth journey relies entirely on the spiritual mindset you cultivate while you're still alive and kicking. Basically, you have to actively prepare your mind beforehand if you want to experience this level of serenity when the time comes.
Okay, so this is where it gets really specific. The foundational concept of this entire text relies on something called the silver cord. The author asserts that human consciousness is actually physically tethered to the human body by a spiritual cord that connects right at the back of the head. It's described as looking mostly silver, maybe slightly orange, and it's basically the vital, mechanical link that keeps your soul bound to your physical form. To help us wrap our heads around this, the text draws a pretty unique comparison. Think about everyday threads, right? Like a fishing line or a phone cord. They tangle constantly. They have a finite length. But the framework states that the silver cord acts way more like a spider's thread. It can stretch infinitely. In fact, the author claims that our souls literally stretch this cord every single night to leave the body and visit the spirit world while we sleep, and miraculously, it never tangles or knots up. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is the stark line the text draws between modern medicine's definition of death and the spiritual definition. Because medically, death is called when brain activity ceases or the heart completely stops. But spiritually, according to this framework, true death has not occurred yet. True death only happens at the exact moment that silver cord finally snaps.
And this distinction builds into a major warning, based on a very specific timeline. The text states that it takes, on average, a full 24 hours for the silver cord to finally break. Just think about that. At 0 hours, when breathing stops and medical death is officially declared, the soul and the physical body are still largely connected. Even 12 hours later, that tether is still there. The soul remains firmly attached, long after the monitor goes flat. Because of this 24-hour window, the author issues a really intense warning regarding premature actions after medical death. The text states that rushing to cremate a body before that 24-hour mark is up results in the spirit actually feeling agonizing physical pain and panic. Why? Well, because the cord is still intact, meaning the soul experiences the damage happening to the physical body. Ignorance of this spiritual timeline, the text argues, leads to severe, totally unnecessary post-death trauma.
This directly leads into the text's highly controversial stance on organ transplantation. Because organs must be harvested while the tissue is still viable, which is usually immediately after medical death is declared, they are being harvested while that silver cord is still attached. According to the author, this means the donor's soul actually feels severe fear and physical pain during the procedure. What's more, the text claims a part of the donor's consciousness remains permanently tied to that extracted organ.
And the framework doesn't stop there. It outlines severe spiritual consequences for the recipient of the organ, too. The text claims that because the transplanted organ still carries a piece of the donor's consciousness, it physically enters the new body. The author argues this creates a high risk of spiritual possession, stating that this spiritual clash is often the hidden cause behind medical organ rejection and that it can ultimately result in a shortened lifespan or premature death for the recipient. Okay, let's switch gears for a second from the physical mechanics over to the mindset you need for this transition. The text points out a profound issue for absolute materialists and atheists. It states that those who firmly believe death is the end literally cannot recognize the afterlife world, even when they are standing right in the middle of it. Because their souls fundamentally deny the new reality, they are plunged into deep, deep spiritual confusion.
But materialism isn't the only trap here. The text lists several worldly attachments and actions that basically act as anchors. A sudden death leaves the soul completely disoriented. Fierce attachments to money or worldly possessions hold the spirit down. And the text also specifically identifies the act of abortion as a source of deep spiritual confusion, causing significant turmoil in the transition process for the souls involved.
Now, you might be familiar with the traditional Buddhist belief that souls wander for 49 days after death. Well, the author provides a specific correction to this based on their framework. The text states that while 49 days is the commonly cited number, most unprepared souls actually linger around their own funerals and homes for about 1 to 2 weeks. During this time, they're just hovering right there, actively listening to the conversations of their grieving families, desperately trying to make sense of what just happened.
So, how do we avoid all that confusion and lingering? The solution is heavily anchored in achieving a state of profound peace and detachment before the end actually comes. Cultivating an unattached mind is presented as the absolute prerequisite for a beautiful, seamless departure into the spirit world. To sum up the actionable solutions, the text urges us to live every single day as if we are completely ready to pass away at any moment. We need to actively work on severing our earthly attachments while we're still healthy. Now, if you do choose to donate organs, the text notes it is only acceptable if it's done out of pure, unattached love with zero lingering desire for your physical body. And finally, the framework emphasizes the importance of correctly conducting ancestor memorial services to maintain harmony across both worlds.
It's a framework that completely flips modern assumptions about life, medicine, and what happens when the monitor goes flat. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If the journey to the afterlife is truly shaped by the mindset we hold today, what worldly attachments are you willing to let go of right now? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I hope it gave you something deeply fascinating to chew on.